Today we're going to paint some autumnal watercolor doodles together. So let's get started for this easy step-by-step process. For this tutorial, I'm going to use this watercolor pad which has 300 GSM paper, but this is my first time using this watercolor pad, so I don't have that much expectations from this paper as it's very textury and it has a very lightweight. So I think I'm going to give it a go for the first time and let's see what happens. I'm placing this paper on my desk and using some washi tapes to stick the paper on the table. For the colors, I'm going to use my Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolor palette. It comes with this brush and it's one of my favorite because it can be used in medium to smaller pieces. Let's get started with the first step, which is sketching a bit. And for the sketches, I'm going to use my HB mechanical pencil. The first doodle, we're going to go with a mushroom. For the mushroom, we're going to start with the stem of the mushroom, and as you can see, I'm drawing an ellipse shape which has one wider end and the top end is a bit narrow. On the top of this stem, we're going to add the cap and the gills portion. So here I'm just drawing this oval shape which kinda makes through the stem, and for the cap we're having this large dome shape in the top. So this is the easiest way possible to make this artistic doodle of mushroom. And the next one is pumpkin. So we're going to start from the oval shape here, which is basically the pulp, and both of the sides of this oval we're going to have some half ovals behind this full oval, and in the top we're going to have this stem, and I am just carving it out to give it a more artistic vibe into it. And that's it for this easy pumpkin doodle. I hope you can understand what I wanted to tell you. The fourth doodles which we're going to color today is a chestnut, and for this chestnut we're not going to sketch out the whole oval, and if you want you can just go with the oval shape first and then erase. That might be easier for you, but I'm not going to go with any outlines, so there's no need to go too much details on the sketches. For the chestnut, we're going to have this cap as well, and for the cap of this chestnut, we're going to have this oval kind of shape. And as you can see that I'm overlapping all these shapes to make it little 3D, then 2D effect. So that's it with the chestnut as well. And the last doodle, which is pine cone. I believe it's one of the tough doodle that we can make in autumnal elements. But the steps that I'm going to show you for a pine cone to color them in is going to be very easy with the watercolors. So here for the sketch, I'm going to go with this egg kind of shape, and here as you can see, I just following this image which is my reference, and I'm just adding all of these shapes which are basically the end of the branches here, and I also added a few lines to draw out the branches, even though the branches are not going to get showed properly after we color them out. So that's it for this 4 doodle sketches, and let's go with the coloring process. Before we color them in, if you want to erase a bit of the pencil marks, you can use any eraser that you have in home and just tap your eraser on the top. Don't rub it that much. If you rub it, it might erase the whole sketch. So just dab the eraser. If it's soft, it's very good, but if it's not, then just dab multiple times to pick up pencil marks and lighten it up. If you have a kneadable eraser, that's good, but I don't think that beginners do have the art supplies that usually people use. So that's my tips for the beginners. So let's get started with the coloring process. So I'm going to use burnt sienna and burnt umber to create this orangey brown color for the mushroom cap. As you can see here, I'm coloring the edges first, and I kind of tried out the wet on wet technique, which is basically adding water in the area that you want to paint and then use wet paint, which means the paints are watery and you put on the water, it will spread it out. But here in this paper it wasn't happening, so I just color it out with the paint directly. And here, as you can see, I haven't skipped any place to color them out. If you want, you can place a few highlights, not coloring any places, but for me, I just wanted to go with this whole illustration colored out. So I have started with a very watery paint with this mixture, and then I started gradually building up the colors. And besides it, as you can see, that I have used a bit of darker paint, which is basically less watery, and I gradually build the colors from the sides and in the bottom. So that's it for this dome shaped capsule. And for the gills, which is basically the inner part of the mushroom, I'm going to go with a bit of raw umber with burnt umber to create this kind of color. And also for the stems, I'm going to go with the same color as well. And for the gills, I also added a bit of yellow ochre to warm the color up. You can stop here, but I wanted to go with too much details on this doodle for making it look more artistic, so I'm going to go with a bit of details with the same brush that I'm using for the coloring. Here I'm using dry paint to tap a few dots to create some dots on the mushroom, but later I thought that it shouldn't be like that. So that's it for the mushroom painting, and the next painting that we're going to go with is the pine cone. For the hardest pine cone, we're going to color the whole sketch with raw umber and yellow ochre with a very wet paint, and then we are using this darker color, which is basically burnt amber, to draw out all the sketches we have done. Basically, we're going to go with the end part of each branches here, and then we are going to gradually adding some shadows from right side and blend it out with the background color. And for the shadows of the inner parts, we're going to use burnt amber on the inner parts, and this is the easiest process you can go with because you don't need to add all of these strokes or all of the details to make a pine cone, I believe, and it was very easy. It becomes very easy when we're just coloring out the inner parts or the depth of these branches, not to show all of the details. So that's it for this pine cone. And the next doodle we're going to color is the chestnut. For this doodle, we're going to start with the body of the nuts. As you can see that here, I'm not going to color the whole part. I have just colored the edges first, then gradually I started to paint in the middle. If you have seen any chestnut, or you can use this reference to paint this out. If you have seen any chestnut, or you can see the reference photo that I'm painting on, it has a very light texture on it. I'm not going to color the whole chestnut at once. We're going to have these light strokes to create all this texture or these stripes. That's it for the base color of the chestnut. And for the caps, we're going to use a mixture of raw amber and burnt amber to color the cap of the chestnut. And as you can see that I'm just going with a very light pressure on this doodle, and gradually I build the color up. And for the cap's texture, it has a very little details on it, so I'm going to go with this very light step. If you want, you can stop right there, but I think I will add a few details on it, so I am gradually building the colors with this dark shade. And this doodle is one of my favorite from the other doodles, honestly. and I really like how this whole thing turned out. Also, if you have seen that the inner part of the cap, I also darken up a bit to match the reference photo. I hope that makes sense. For the fourth doodle we're going to go with is pumpkin. For the base color of pumpkin, we're going to use cadmium orange hue and a bit of burnt sienna to make this dark orange color. And we're going to go with little wet paint to draw out all the pulp or the shapes we have drawn for the pumpkin. And then we will add a bit of water and blend the inner part of this pumpkin. If you want to go with the easiest way possible of coloring pumpkin, you can stop here for the pulp and just add the stem color with a bit of sap green or any other green that you have. If you want to go a little further to create more dimension to the pumpkin, you can just color the edges as well. So here I'm just coloring out all the edges of these pulps or the pumpkin parts, and then I am gradually adding the colors in the bottom and in the left corner because I wanted to portray that the light is coming from the top right, and I will just gradually build the color in the left side. And for the stems, I'm going to use the sap green and a bit of lemon yellow color hue to create this light green shade for the stem. And that's it for this pumpkin as well. And now we're going to have a few easy doodles without sketches, and I'm going to go with this same brush that I'm using so far, and I will paint this little shape. If you want to paint this kind of little doodles, I add the stem color with a bit of sap green or any other green that you have, and a mistake like I made here in the chestnut tree leaf. For each of the leaves, I thought that I'd just go with a very loose kind of leaf doodle here so that you can use it in your bullet journal or in your art. And for the leaves, as you can see here, I'm just going with a very wet paint at first, and then I added a bit of color in the center. If you don't like any colors that's showing up too much, or you are feeling that the pieces have too much water on it, just tap the water with a tissue paper. I think this is going to be a little easy for you who doodle on your notebooks, and I think you can go with these steps even if you have 100 GSM papers. Please excuse the background noises because it's the afternoon and it's the most busiest time for making voiceovers, so I hope you understand. I hope you noticed that we're just going with 4 colors, which is burnt sienna, burnt amber, raw amber, and yellow ochre, and which is very much fall colors, my favorite colors to work with. After creating all these little leafy doodles, we are going to add the stems of these leaves. As these leaves are very small, I wanted to go with this detail brush that I have and just going to add a bit of the branches or the stems of each leaf with the same color, but I will pick up directly from the pans of this watercolor so that I have a very dark colors. And that's it for this whole painting process. I think it's much easier and it was very fun to do. It took me only 20 minutes to create all of these doodles, so I hope if you practice you will do a better job than me. So that's it for this whole tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed this and learned a bit from my process. If you want more depth from the sketches, let me know. I will try my best to create more videos like this. That's it for this whole video, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to my channel to support me, and I'll see you next time. Bye guys.